to them and stuff like that. But even that, if their palate isn't trained, or they just eat McDonald's slop most of the time, it won't translate. So
yeah, I think that. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say that there's a lot there. The conversation. There's a couple of points I just wanted to sort of chime in on. One of the first things was, we talked about a lot of us, I think almost all of us are probably coming from the tech sphere in terms of our daily work. And I think someone pointed out that they feel almost more satisfaction upon completing a sort of, even if it's a fairly simple craftsmanship or just something physical, there's a better sense of satisfaction than, say, completing a sort of tech work. And I just wanted to pick up on that, in that, for me, I actually worked as a cook throughout all my college years. And I've always said I actually felt more satisfaction from seeing sort of the finished food item that I'd created, the meal, versus anything I've really done in the tech world. So that was just an interesting point that I definitely can, that I'm amenable to. And you see that in Tom as well. He's someone that feels a sort of deep satisfaction with the work he's doing. And it is interesting in our current age of most people, especially in our spheres, having white collar jobs, there is just that general feeling of ennui and that lack of satisfaction with the work that you're sort of doing when you're with your email job, which obviously, I'm not someone I agree with Rajiv. I'm not someone who's necessarily saying we should all go out and get a blue collar job. Having a white collar job working in these spheres has their benefits, and they're great benefits. And given the choice, I wouldn't go to a blue collar job. The second point is, Rajiv, I would recommend you check out William Morris if you've ever heard of that name.
Sounds like it could be familiar. Do you want to say more?
So yeah, William Morris was someone during sort of the latter end of the Victorian era, during industrialization, he led what was called the craftsmanship movement, basically in England, sort of associated with the Fabian Society and socialism light, I would say. But yeah, his big sort of thing was that he was trying to reintroduce or reinforce craftsmanship as not just, an art form or something that's tactically good for people, but something that is just a societal good in terms of the quality and the satisfaction that comes from the people that are actually working and creating these things. So I don't know him too deeply, but it sounds like he'd be up your alley. So I would just recommend you maybe check him out. And then yeah. I'm going on a bit, so I'll end here soon. But on the note of the book being sort of rich in its descriptions of sort of the physical world within this time, I thought it was interesting too, is that as someone who reads a lot of literature, and sometimes I guess you could say, capital L literature, obviously it's written oftentimes in a very highfalutin way, very intellectual, lots of $10 words, all the rest of it. And I would say Ken Follett it's really rare that it's done well like this, but he does a great job of, his novel is still, I think, capital L literature, but it's also not written in sort of this really academic style. It's an easy read, but it's also, there's very deep truths and deep ideas that are expressed in fairly common language. And I just wanted to read real quick a section that sort of stood out to me on that front. And it says, at first he had treated it like any other job. He had been angry and resentful when the master builder had warned him that his work was not quite up to standard. He knew himself to be rather more careful than the average mason. But then he realized that the walls of a cathedral had to not just be good, but perfect. This was because the cathedral was for God, and also because the building was so big that the slightest lean in the walls, the merest variation from the absolutely true and level, could weaken the structure fatally. Tom's resentment turned to fascination. The combination of a hugely ambitious building with merciless attention to the smallest detail opened Tom's eyes to the wonder of his craft. And, that's a fairly easy sentence to read. It's not particularly complicated in its structure or words, but he's hitting on some really deep things there, right? The idea of the cathedral being the house of God and the thing that needs perfection. And it's also kind of going into where I think the book's going to go forward with. In that, and I can see what you were saying earlier, Rajiv, about this sort of hitting on true masculinity in a way. It's, you know, Tom is not necessarily all that worried about acquiring the most wealth or the biggest house or whatever. He has this sort of higher calling, this higher ambition, this deeper meaning that he's trying to pursue. And all of these different ideas are encapsulated in that pretty simple paragraph, which is that's writing taken to its basic zenith, right? That's what good writing is. You're hitting on deep truths, big ideas, in comprehensible language. So
yeah, that kind of threw me off the style of the writing at the beginning, because I had just been reading on and off some like Borges and stuff like that, and to go from that to reading this was like fluid. It was very, yeah, it was almost like it was one of those reading experiences where you could just kind of like read and you don't have to double back and double process as much, because it is just so well laid out that it doesn't need a whole lot of extra explanation, because it just hits on so many levels.
Yeah. So I'll take this in a different route, which we can always backtrack. But speaking of Tom and representations of masculinity, I think the other thing that I find very edifying about just like him as a character, but also other things, is like he has a lot of other notable masculine qualities. Number one being he struggles with impulse control. And so if you think about like most of what is considered like education, like for men in this time period, but also throughout history, is some sort of like understanding how to do like engender impulse control and discipline in a man to direct it towards higher things. And I appreciate, like, I mean, if you look on page 34 where you see Tom's anger, like running after the guy, like the outlaw who stole his pig, or you see his like, you know, like he gets really angry about like, you know, how the guy then sells the pig to like go to the whorehouse, but then he's like, actually, it might be pretty fun to go to a whorehouse. You know, and so I think this is a very sort of just very realistic portrayal of like what it means to be a man in that context. And these are things that I think are like sanitized out of public consciousness. You know, there's the meme, like that meme of like, oh, I don't think my boyfriend or my husband has emotions, but he's like thinking about his ancestors